Welcome to the Medical Independent Innovation in Healthcare podcast series, where we explore the advances that are transforming Irish healthcare and the innovative minds behind them. From cutting-edge technologies to groundbreaking research to new models of care, Ireland is at the forefront of medical innovation. Our guests are leading figures in the Irish and international healthcare community who are revolutionising the way patients are being treated. So whether you're a healthcare professional, a patient, or simply curious about the latest developments in Irish medicine, join us for an engaging and informative discussion.
Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Medical Independent Innovation in Healthcare podcast series. I'm your host, Priscilla Lynch, Clinical Editor of the Medical Independent. Joining me in this episode is Professor Dominic A. Hegarty, Consultant in Pain Management and Neuromodulation at the Orthopaedic and Spine Centre, Mater Private Hospital, Cork. Professor Hegarty has specialised in pain management for over 2 decades and is recognised as one of the country's foremost interventional pain management doctors, who is constantly developing new pain techniques to deal with the most complex cases in this area. He co-founded the Division of Pain Medicine in the Department of Anaesthesia and Pain Medicine at Cork University Hospital and South Infirmary and Victoria Hospital in Cork, where he served as a consultant for 8 years in the HSE before joining the Mater Private Hospital in Cork, where he was appointed as Clinical Director in 2023. Professor Hegarty is also the first formal professor in pain medicine at University College Cork, the current president of the World Institute of Pain, and clinical director of Pain Relief Ireland, and he also has a number of other research interests and posts. Firstly, Dominic, can you tell me a bit about why you decided to get involved in pain medicine specifically?
Thank you, Priscilla, and it's great to be involved. It's great to have pain being talked about because we're left behind, and that's one of the reasons I got involved in pain medicine. I suppose my background comes from 2 things. I'm a physiologist by training way back, so you're always interested in how things are working and how they don't work, and then anaesthesia, and then onto pain, which is a fundamental part of the anaesthesia world. And I was very lucky halfway through the structure of training at that stage, you got an opportunity to do some research, take a year and do some research. So I took the opportunity to look into pain world, into particularly low back pain, radicular pain, which has always been something I've been keen in. And I started to understand the enormity of this problem, and I began to really like it and move forward. And with 2 years left in your senior fellowship, you had a great opportunity then to learn more, do more, finish my PhD. And as I was finishing my PhD, I was also taking on a master's in pain education and pain medicine from Edinburgh. So it was a real, bombardment of information, and either I was going to sink or swim. I was either going to get stuck in and enjoy this, or I was going to leave in a hurry. And thankfully, I stayed put, and I've never looked back. And it's been a pleasure, really, to be in this area. It's such an exciting area, and even in my short window of 15 or 20 years involved now, so many things have changed, so many things for the better, in my opinion, and there's a greater acceptance. So it was the challenge, the innovation, looking forward. It had everything you wanted from my point of view, and huge patient impact, which I would like to think is something we should all be looking for.
I've always found it really interesting that pain is one of the main reasons that people go to see a clinician. Yet pain medicine was one of the most recent formal specialties to be confirmed in Ireland, despite the fact that it is so important. It wasn't recognised, as you said there, and that is something obviously that is very important for specialists who work in the area, finally getting that recognition so that you can adequately treat patients.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And I suppose it probably fell in between stools a little bit, because the surgeon was meant to look after the post-surgical pain because they were a breast surgeon or vascular surgeon, so they had enough skills to do what they wanted. The rheumatologist was dealing with it because they had joint pain and they had some aspect to it. And then the GP or primary care world was then left with what was being discharged and hoping that was going to work a little bit. And behind all of that, actually, the flaw really was nobody was taking responsibility to bring pain medicine as a medical career, as a medical skill set that needs to be gone. Instead, we all learnt off the hoof. And I myself would have learned it as an intern. You did what your surgical professor wanted you. He wanted 2 paracetamols, Salpadol, and whatever else you could find, give it to the patient, send them home, and we'll see him in clinic in 6 weeks' time. And that was it. And everybody was happy because they got out the door and that was it. But that, of course, is completely, archaic now, and it's not the way we should be going about it. But unfortunately, that's just the way it was, and that's not good enough, of course. And that's why I push the word pain medicine and pain medicine and management, because I think it is a medicine. It is definitely needs the skill set of taking the whole patient, thinking about it uniformly, And I suppose when you take it with that context, it makes a lot of sense why people present with pain. It is the number one standard why people come into A&E. About 70% of people come in with that aspect to it itself. GPs are dealing with it on a day-to-day basis, and yet they don't have the real, I suppose, skill set to come on board. And that is, and I suppose when the university took that on board, and this was one of the criticisms of the National University of the UCC, was you're not giving enough information and not teaching people enough from a pain perspective, and hence my appointment, and hence the structure to try and bring that skill base up and bring people more confident in it, get them thinking about management of that from a very early stage, and that's really exciting. Internships, how to prescribe, what to prescribe, not just give them the hardcore, and let them understand it, appreciate what's involved, and sometimes appreciate that pain tablets aren't the way to go, that there is other options out there, and that's equally important for us to do that. So the university taking a good lead in this, and I think this is really, really useful long term. And then, of course, you supplement that with GP practices and giving webinars and moving things forward and giving constant information. And as you know yourself, Priscilla, the topics, thankfully to the medical Indo, have always looked for pain topics, and it's a regular thing in the journals associated with your good selves to give that message out to the readership, and to keep pain in front of their mindset. And I know from your feedback, and the feedback we get back, is people read them, people enjoy them, people see roles for them. And it's always exciting when you hear physicians saying, geez, I didn't think of pain that way before, or we do things differently, or where we're going. So it's exciting. It is a work in progress, and that's where we need to be. And we need to keep pain medicine as a top end, not just as the bottom end of the list, keeping it as a key window for people to move forward. And patients will really appreciate it, because once you're out of pain, or at least in better position, you can make better decisions, you'll be able to present with better issues, and it becomes clearer very often then that that isn't quite cholecystitis, it's an appendicitis, and so be it, because you can actually interpret things a little bit better, and people can move forward a lot quicker.
Absolutely. You really hit the nail on the head there, because there's huge interest among our readers, I find, in our pain articles. All the doctors want to know, what are the latest guidelines, what are the latest pain medications, what are the latest algorithms, because as you've said, they're really in the undergraduate curriculum and in basic training. Perhaps there hasn't been enough of a focus on just pain itself, and that is something that you are looking to help with, obviously, in your role in University College Cork and in the medical curriculum. You've also connected with other organisations, say the World Institute of Pain, and European organisations as well, to see what's happening there. So that's obviously very important to you, knowing what's happening in other countries and what's coming down the tracks, and that we make sure that we are adequately dealing with pain, because I think there is a huge expectation. GPs find that they should know everything in this area, but they don't, and they can't. And really, that it's, when do we refer to a pain specialist, and how do we get access to a pain specialist?
Yeah, absolutely, I agree. I mean, globally, pain medicine is still a very young issue, discipline, and management of it. You mentioned the World Institute of Pain. That itself is approximately 30 years old. Now, people often ask you, what does that do? Well, actually, it's an educational platform. It's an organization that ultimately wants to train pain physicians to a standardized level of interventional workload. And that involves good prescribing, good assessment, but how to do the skill sets, how to do the injection processes properly for a safety element, but good returns. And that's in everybody's interest. So it just brings the standard up. And we have 25 different sections right across the globe. We have multiple languages involved now. That's how it has grown, and that just shows you where this is going. And it's just exploding in some parts of the world. And the number of people sitting the exam and the fellowship is just phenomenal. It's exciting to see all these young doctors wanting to take a career pathway in this way, because they realize their patients need it, and they're willing to take that step themselves, do an exam, bring themselves to a level, and then perform at that level. And that, of course, is going to bring better innovation, because they're going to come up with solutions that we didn't even think of. Industry then responds to that as well, because if they see that this is an interest, they'll come and they'll bring new ideas. And that's an exciting way, again, for not only physicians, but for the patients, because that's what we want to do. We want to get more of the good stuff, the good equipment back into the community, let people get the benefits that they want from it, and interpret it. So the global scale is important, educational wise, bringing the standard up globally is very important, and meeting the ethos of doctors wanting to help, and pain is a very important aspect to it. But also, and we may touch on this later, is times when not to treat and when to use treatments properly and more efficiently. So that's another challenge, but that's part of being educated as a doctor, knowing that you have choices, making that choice, making the best choice is an important part of it, and it's a real team approach, and that's also something you might enter it as a individual in pain medicine, but the teams that you come in contact with are fantastic, and generally people want to improve the overall well-being. So it's exciting to be involved and to bring these things back and travel the world and sometimes see how we do things in Ireland, and then we're showing them a little bit, which is great. That's really nice to be able to fly the Irish flag at some of these centres and say where we're going and whatever. So it's important to me at that level, but I think it's important globally that we lead in this element. And it's by no coincidence that we have the leading medtech industries in Ireland. We have the leading pharmaceutical business in Ireland. So they commit to the economy here really, really well. So we should be able to lead on the educational platform. We have a very strong faculty of pain medicine through the anesthesiology group as well. We've led in that aspect to it, many different programs. So loads of opportunity, but I think there should be even more. And hopefully via UCC and the faculty, we'll be able to build up this profile for the GP population and nursing care, perhaps even physio care, pharmacists, to bring the skill sets right up along the way. So lots to do for sure.
That's interesting that you've made that point, because I think when we think of pain, a lot of the time it is about analgesia, but there's so much more to pain relief than analgesia. And we're coming to realize that the more we learn about the human body and how it responds, and working in a multidisciplinary team, as well as you've mentioned there, the role of physiotherapy, for example, other therapies. But you mentioned there about industry specifically. You yourself have been involved with industry, and I know you have an awful lot of expertise in neuromodulation and the potential there. And there still is a lack of awareness about the role of neuromodulation in pain management and how good it can be for certain conditions in certain patients.
Yeah, no, and thank you for raising it, because very often this is the conversation that is tagged on to the end of the conversation. So it's great to be able to discuss it. But you're right, and I suppose as a caveat for your listenership, look, I work with all the companies. I don't prefer one over the other. I take the bits I like. So just for clarity and transparency, so I don't prefer one over the other, but I use them all. And that's the exciting bit, is you see the good bits and you begin to use it. And I suppose that the concept of technology triggered my mind about 10 or 12 years ago now, when I went to Guy's in St. Thomas's in London, which was the centre of it at that time. I went over to say, look, what's this all about? What's the story? How can technology help us? And was, I think, probably blown away within about a week, realised this is definitely where we need to be. Drug-free strategies, independent control. Patients were able to do and control and change their quality of life, not just their pain level, their sleeping patterns, within a very short period of time. And then the physiologist in me kicked in going, why is this? And what we're doing is we're modifying the best part of the spinal tract, that dorsal column, and your listeners will realize that's where all the nerve fibers have to pass along. And if we can counterbalance a negative signal, electrical activity, which is physiology, with a positive one, which was coming from a device, and we neutralize it, the brain gets a break and the brain gets a breather, and then actually life comes back to normal. And the fascinating thing, within a number of days, and if not even sooner, this impact can happen. It's a phenomenal thing to see happening. And I think all my staff, when I put them in theatre and we chat to people afterwards in recovery, they're still shocked. They still don't believe that this is, higgery piggery pokery, something going on here. What's the story? But it's brilliant, and it really does make a difference. And we have to think this way, because if you think about pharmacy and the pharma world, we're struggling. We haven't really had any new products, maybe in about 10 years. There's some new opioid-based products and there's some new antagonists coming up, but nothing is really going to come to market in the near future. When that industry doesn't come through, you're going to be struggling a little bit. So we've got to go for the drug-free, we've got to go technology. And then the reverse of that, the growth in medtech business globally over the last 10, 15 years is phenomenal. The software opportunities to manage these elements have been brilliant. And of course, pain does match it in terms of the age profile. We have an expectation in our individuals now who are really useful in understanding how to use iPads, how to use phone technology, how to communicate that platform itself. And we have a growing population, which we do need to manage, not only in Ireland, but globally as well. They estimate that about 7% of the world audience who should have electronic devices for pain are only getting it, not 7%. So you can see the global aspect and the fear that goes on there as well, which is really amazing in its own sense. And again, there's other elements to technology. It's not all about stimulation. It is, of course, but you have platforms such as the Get Ready platform, which I use ourselves here to communicate with the patients as well. So once they have the device in place, we need to stay in touch. We need to stay with them and mind them. We're not able to bring them all the way down from, North Clare or Dublin or Wexford to just sit in front of me. What's going on? Can we see how they're doing on an app system? Can we get that feedback before they come back in? That's exactly what we're designing and developing, and it's been proven to be very useful. And not only that, the patients love it. They can really keep that continuity going on very well. So we're able to pick patients even better. We're able to isolate patients better and work out who this device is for. And the economics of that is really sensible. These devices are not cheap, let's be fair. And that is one of the problems at the moment. Between 25 and maybe 30,000 euros for some of these devices. So they're not something you're going to see rolling out into GP practices overnight. If we have better market globally, the price will come down, and that's part of the innovation. How we make cheaper equipment that does what we want to do, that's part of the challenge. But we need to get this right. And I suppose insurers, we go there, have a role to play in this, but patient selection, very important along that way. And then finally, I suppose, virtual reality is going to have a role to play in this element. I mean, there's some really good work from, say, the Mayo Clinic, and we've been trying to do some work with the physio department here locally on virtually rehabilitating people, imagining them, re-encourage them. Very much like, say, an occupational therapist would train someone how to rewalk or to reuse hardware. You can try and do this visually within themselves. And it's a challenge to get that mix right. Not everybody's comfortable in virtual world, but I think as we get better with that, it's going to be, another opportunity to just get people on their feet quicker, maybe. Not just for the technology, it's easy, but obviously for non-based patients as well. So it's such a booming business, and it's such a really interesting world. It's very easy to get sucked into it. So we need to have that independence. We need to stand back and be clever and pick the right people. And that's a skill in itself to know who would do well with this little bit of equipment. But it's been fascinating. Now there's really no age boundaries. These devices, which are implantable within 2 hours in theatre, as I said, people will go home the next day, the usual wound healing for a couple of days and sutures, and you'll see a reduction in opioids, 60% within about 6 weeks. You'll see them sleeping better within a matter of nights. You'll see them moving around much, much quicker without their products. And the big thing, the family life or their partners or those people around them see the improvement, and the atmosphere changes overnight. And people get, as I say, you've given me back my partner, is a phrase some people say to me straight away. And that's phenomenal. I mean, what other discipline could do that? So that's the exciting bit for me. And that makes up for all the other challenges and all the bits that go on with it. But that's what we do it for. Getting one person right a day is brilliant, and it really is helpful. So you can see I'm excited about it because it's fantastic. And, age doesn't matter, because people want different quality of life, and that's fantastic. Some people want to go walking. Some people are very happy just have a comfortable afternoon, be able to go walk the dog and know they can go have a cup of coffee with a friend in 3 days' time, and they don't have to worry about whether they're going to be in the bed or not. And that's what life is about, and that's what pain robs people of. So I think we should do our best to get it back.
That is fascinating. And I know those who are listening will be wondering, and what type of patients are most suitable for these devices in your own experience to date? And I think you mentioned there as well that age is no barrier, because certainly some clinicians will be listening who've had patients long-term on medications. They've tried other non-invasive approaches maybe to pain relief, and they're just not really getting anywhere, but there are other options.
Just focusing on that cohort in itself, if I may, for a second, the biggest asset of patient selection really is an individual who's actually willing to put in that little bit of extra work to get the results. Okay, what does that mean? If you put the electronic device into most people or anyone, you'll probably get about 50-60% improvement by doing very little. That's okay. That's reasonable. But to make the real hit, to make that 80% and that real big numbers, the individual either begins to start walking, maybe to the gym, does the pool work, etc. So is willing to engage or willing to get back to work or willing to cut their medication down. And that's what you're looking for, that willingness to do that. So it's very easy for someone who's in pain to say, oh, I'd do anything just to get out of pain. That's okay by me, but what else? What are you willing to do? And we try and work that out before. So this isn't something you meet someone straight away and put it in. Generally speaking, you have a bit of time to work it up. I'd always be keen to look at the other or explore the less invasive options first, move across to maybe interventions that would be appropriate and suitable, and see how they respond to that. And then that helps point you through the pathways of where we're going to. I've mentioned with the digital platform, for example, we would try in some of our patients, put them on, follow them through with some questions. So we begin to make that pattern when they're at home and seeing how they're behaving and how things are improving or not. And then that's fast tracking individual decisions. So instead of having to come in to see me in clinic and then see the nurse and physio, some of these decisions can be made off site. And when they come in, you say, look, you're performing like this. I can see you're improving or not. And then we can move with the solution along that way. So it's about picking people at the right way. And sometimes medication is the right option, sometimes physio, hydrotherapy, physio. So every option should be considered. Sometimes a little bit of everything is what's needed along the way. But devices are definitely, a big winner. But again, top 5% only. I mean, that's the bottom line, is that, you are in that elite cohort when you get it. By the book, you're looking at situations where people have that unfortunate term of persistent post-surgical pain. Classically, it's the sciatica and the radicular pain that continues despite surgery and physio, and they're not settling down. 2 years later, they're still stuck. They want to get back to life. That's a classic. 70% globally is implanted for that. A complex regional pain syndrome, for example, cervical and upper limb pain, exactly the same as, say, the lower back. That impacts on people's lifestyle immediately. Even headaches, even occipital-based headaches, which are often labeled and mislabeled perhaps as migraine and tension headaches and cluster headaches, all labels we stick on headache. You come in, we do a little bit of work, we work it out, we can implant devices, and overnight again, people will really feel the benefit of it. It's not perfect for everyone, but it's actually useful along the way. And, this is something, in fairness, the Mater Private here in Cork is very strong in trying to support this, as we have a whole structure around kind of orthopaedic, spinal and pain medicine around it. So we ensure that we get the right patients by working with the spinal surgeons, the neurosurgeons and myself. So it's a really exciting time.
It's interesting you mentioned that, just about your work in the private sector now, and obviously you had many years in the public sector. But I think in Ireland, and as in many countries, a lot of innovative new techniques and new technologies come first to a country often through the private sector. But how do we make sure then that public patients get access to these innovations so that everybody can benefit?
Yeah, and that's a real challenge, and I'm glad you pointed that out, because again, for your listenership, I've come through the HSE service for all of my career. Essentially, the last 5 years has been totally in the private world. I was a consultant for 9 years in the HSE, working at Cork University Hospital and in the Munster zone and catching that area. So I really can see it from both sides, and I can see the struggle. And I struggled when I was in the HSE. In fairness, to be fair, they did their best. They did what they could a bit, but it definitely needed leadership, and it needed someone to break the barriers down a little bit, I have to say. And that's probably where it struggles, because it is such a big ship and there is so much going on. Pain definitely doesn't come up top of that list, that's for sure, and therefore you slide behind. And I felt bad that the patients weren't getting it. But in the private world, it has its own challenges, that's for sure. A different group. It's a smaller outfit, so you can move, you can try and get things. But let's not overestimate as well, because obviously everything we do is mainly insurance driven. The insurers have a lot to play in this as well, and I think that's very important in terms of innovation. And if we can demonstrate in the private world how successful a technique is and how successful the strategy of managing patients is, then that can easily be taken back into the HSE system and used properly. I've mentioned the Get Ready and the electronic platform. There's no reason why we couldn't be able to assess people in the HSE using something similar. Investment doesn't take a particularly brainy person to run an app. It gets it right and you see the results. But you can streamline people. You can screen people at source, direct them into neurosurgery, orthopaedic or pain medicine, rather than having everybody queue up going through the one door. Let's open up 3 doors. Let's pick out what we need to do it. So that's how the private understanding of how we can effectively do it, take that across to the other side of the world. You were trying to do it when I was in the HSE, but again, it is a difficult challenge. The cost of this is important as well. And I think the companies would be very helpful if they could demonstrate the success in an Irish model to take it across into the HSE and make it happen. But again, that's a very difficult and complex discussion to be having.
That is a very good point, though, because I think there is a more established pathway for new drugs to be approved and rolled out, and particularly in some specialties like cancer and perhaps maybe rheumatology and other disease areas like that, that it can be more straightforward. You might have the medicines bodies, they'll approve it, and then the HSE will look at the cost of it and it's approved. But new technologies is kind of a grayer area. And again, as pain is even a newer specialty, it can be hard to get that innovation, can't it? Just from bench to bedside side, which is obviously frustrating because analgesics, as good as they are, they have particular side effects, they have problems. Drug-free solutions offer an awful lot of benefits for some patients. So I suppose really
Yeah.
that is something, isn't it, that you hope that will improve and that public systems will take that on board and try to be more open to these technologies and to show, once they're evidence-based, that they can be approved. Because I know even in the NHS in England, they did recently roll out a number of wearable devices for migraine sufferers, which I thought was very interesting.
100%. I think that's the way it does, and that's where I think the private world can lead the way. For example, I just take it as an example. We have a very good wearable device called the BioWave wearable, which is really useful for myofascial pain, shoulder, trapezius joints. In the States for 10 years, I had to become a little bit creative around that dreaded COVID times when we couldn't get the patients in because there was a system, and yet I was able to forward them this piece of equipment, take a Zoom call with them per se, illustrate or show them how to use it, and they were able to treat themselves in the home environment. And that was just being innovative, taking things forward and making it useful. Cost analysis, very reasonable. In fact, about 2 years ago, I took that to the Irish Healthcare Awards, and it was a winner at that because it was showing total proactivity of what could be done when you manage it. You don't have, that doesn't take an awful lot to do. The services are there, the equipment is there, and we moved people out of a very tricky situation to a very good treatment that's been reliable at this point. And it goes back to your point about wearability. Why can't we have this clinic? I run a full clinic at this point in time. There's no reason why that couldn't be done in the HSE. Pick out the right patients, manage it properly, put one or two skill base to it, and it could be a flourishing business. I think that's where we get caught on. But it's the element of fear, isn't it? Nobody wants to take that jump. Nobody wants to jump ahead and say, oh, goodness, what if it goes wrong? What if it goes? Just step back for a minute, use our common sense here, look at the logical thing. And once it, functionally can be worked, can have responsibility, have the right governance, these things can work really, really well. And that's just one illustration. There are many other out there in different disciplines and how things move forward. Cardiac pacemakers, go back 20 odd years ago, it would have been rocket science. You're putting a wire into somebody's heart to control it. My goodness. Now this is happening 15, 16 times per hospital around this country every single day of the week. And it's so normal that we utilize it. But I think that is one element. I think maybe the insurances in this country and the insurance firms are a little bit reluctant. They haven't changed their systems for about 10 to 15 years. They don't recognize that things are changing. And actually, I think they're costing themselves, because if they open the door up and discuss it with people who understand where the thing is going, where the plan is going for, think ahead, offer some of these services, you might actually reduce the running costs on a day-to-day basis and cut down things like cervical facet denervation, because there's actually an implantable small device that can be utilized. It doesn't take much, and it could just take a little bit of conversation, and it will not cost us a huge amount of money. In fact, it would probably be more economic, and I think it would probably treat more people directly by just understanding what technology can do for us. So this is something that the industry is scared of. If we treat people, we'll end up treating more people, but we'll get people better, and you cut them out on the other end. And it's demonstrated time and time again. Chronic pain patients are extraordinarily expensive on the system, probably in the region of 12 to 15,000 a year at some patients to deal with them on an annual basis. The average, taking all in, is about 5,000 to 6,000 euros to actually manage a chronic pain patient. The top end is about 15,000 per year. That's been shown time and time again. And that's where the stimulators come into their own, because they're able to become cost efficient within 3 years. We know that. We can see that in all aspects, either turning up in the hospital setting, drug bills, even so far as, say, social payments, because some individuals can get back to work. So they slip down to the 20 hours of disability and they're quite happy to get supported. And yet they're psychologically, physically getting back into the community and doing a huge amount of work. So the impact on managing this thing properly is the right way to go. The dilemma is that list is so long now that there is such a big waiting list. How do you tackle that? But that's, there's probably ways to do that as well. And filtering, looking for new futures is good, but we need to be careful. We need to be very careful, but we need to be creative.
I think that's advice that the HSE would like to hear. That there are long-term savings, there is innovation there is things that we can do for patients that can ease the burden. But I think you mentioned the word fear there as well. There is a lot of fear, I think, when we deal with pain medicine for some reason. And particularly even when you look at the bedrock of pain management, I suppose, for GPs in particular and those in the community does remain painkillers. But there is a lot of fear at the moment because of what's happened, particularly in the US with the opioid crisis, and in this country with particular drugs as well, that there are issues. That is something that I think there's a lot of awareness of. Irish authorities have been very good for stepping in and reminding prescribers and clinicians about the need to be prudent, to follow guidelines. But then there is the flip side. Are patients getting adequate pain relief post-surgical procedures?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as you said, this is the nuts and bolts of it from our primary care physician, what impacts on their day-to-day activity. And I agree with you. I think the prescribing pad is still a very valuable tool for us. I think perhaps doctors forget. We were very lucky. We've got a lovely skill set. We've got permission from the government to prescribe a lot of really potent, high-level stuff because we're meant to be able to understand them, know the rules and regulations, say, look, that's your choice, where we go. So it probably is something we've forgotten, that we should be able to make those decisions and make them with confidence. So therefore you wonder why is this problem? And it probably is a little bit of knowledge gapping is at this point. And it goes back to our early bit where people just don't have that bit of confidence from early in their career. They're suddenly handed with the license to prescribe, and yet they're not really taught how to prescribe or when to prescribe or what to prescribe. And part of the problem is this. Sometimes people don't even have an idea when they should prescribe that medication and when to give it. Something as simple as a pain score or a pain interpretation can be very helpful. Say if you have a pain over 5 out of 10, well, then you should take a little bit of something stronger or not, and be guided. Also understanding the pain and the type of pain. So if it's an inflammatory-based pain, well, you should be reaching for an anti-inflammatory, not your opioids. On the other hand, surgical pain responds very well a short period of time to opioids. And I know that's a real, I'm going to use the word dirty word. That's a bit unfair, but it is a word that really carries a message straight across. Most physicians, and I say globally, really don't want their patients on opioid, no matter what discipline you're on, and that's fair enough. But when you do need them, you need to have the skill set then to manage them. And I think it's very important that we as prescribers take away that fear, understand what we want to do for it, understand the guidelines. And my rule simply is when I speak to anyone about this, and I've done many talks, and you know yourself, I've done some script work on this, is you're going, if you start a product, you have to have a plan to come off the product. So you shouldn't be writing that product up until you're also able to prescribe the downswing. When is it coming down? What's the finishing line? What's the goal? What's the outcome? We do this in every single thing we do in life. If I go to the gym, I want to get fit. What's my outcome? Well, I want to be able to run 2 kilometers, 5 months. We have a goal, we set a goal and we work towards it. And yet we'll write a prescription and we probably don't know when the finishing line is on it. And it just goes on and on. You've mentioned it yourself there post-operatively. It was the commonest thing we noticed from the cardiothoracic world when I was involved with them is that people were going home on these products. 3 months later, they were turning back up at the clinic to see post or cabbage, and they were still on opioids. And you're going, oh my goodness me, what's going on here? Were they using it properly? I don't know. But they were still on it. They thought they were meant to be on it. And that's not good in the overall picture. The other extreme is the one you said, is where they go home with 2 paracetamol when they really did need something with an opioid family, because you know what, opioids been around for a long time. Guess what, we all have opioid receptors physiologically available to us. We have an endogenous opioid system, so nature built us needing a little bit of opioid at times when we need it. And the clever thing is knowing how to prescribe it and when to prescribe it. So a starting and finishing point, I think, is one of the flaws we make, and then knowing the product. And I think that's the other thing, is that people should pick an area or a product they're comfortable with, but then continue to use it so they learn the pros, the cons, and they'll be surprised how much a low dose at the right time is as effective as a big dose at the wrong time. And it's much, much easier, and you control it. The individual gets that breather of, oh my goodness, I got a breather for a couple of hours after my surgery and the wound is settling down. I can now get back on my feet again. They'll feel better, and everything starts going in the right way, and the body heals itself over a period of time. So it's really sensitive, and some people are really scared of it, and I just don't feel that that's the right way. I think we should be able to understand, fill that gap in, knowledge it, and maybe the onus is on everybody, the colleges, the faculties, the pain physicians and surgeons, to put programs in place for everybody to say, this is what you do in these situations. Now, to be fair, lots of surgeons and lots of GPs are really good at this. I'm not knocking at all here. Like, Burns management, really excellent move forward. Cardiothoracics, as I've mentioned, have really got the act together. Breast surgery is one of the leading ones, in my opinion, because, and thankfully, because post-mastectomy, for example, and breast-based surgery, which affects an awful lot of ladies in this country, 15 or 20% of those individuals end up with persistent post-surgical pain. So great, they have lovely surgery and they're cancer-free after it, but they've got persistent pain for the rest of their life. Now, what do you do with that? You need to manage it. You need to manage it early. And sometimes it's early intervention by the surgeon. So there's a strategy of they're getting the message. We got to get in there early, manage it, and come down on the far side. So it just shows you how solving the problem within the services can be very useful. And I think primary care and GP world could equally take a plan and lead out and say, look, we're happy to treat this when it goes that way. They do it very well. Shingles management, it's actually a credit to the organizations in the primary that now the minute someone has half a sniffle of a little shingle, they're onto patches and they've got their analgesia running very quickly. And I think it's been brilliant, particularly for the older cohort. They manage them quickly and it's great. You don't see very often as much shingles as I would have in my career 10 years ago. It was a major problem. Whole post-therapeutic neuralgia and a rib pain was crippling. Now it's very low level of attendance. They wouldn't be logging it in there. And I think it's great because of early common sense strategy, and yet those drugs are all very powerful, and sometimes in an older group, which even makes them more polypharmacy rich problems coming at you. So you really got to think about it, but it works because they've taken the initiative, they have a plan, they've got their confidence, and it works. And I think that's just 2 or 3 demonstrations of how the potential is there, but we need to jump in on top of that a small bit.
So essentially, early intervention and prevention is also very important in pain medicine, which, people mightn't necessarily think.
Yeah, it is. And I think that's important. Now, again, there was the other philosophy several years ago from an anesthetic perspective. Is that, maybe we should get everybody onto these products before they even get the knife to skin scenario. That didn't work out. That was a little bit over the top. It was hard to manage it, the dosages, etc. So that's a bit too much. But I do think that perioperative window is important. And again, that's really a window where I think the primary care and the GP world have a massive impact because they see the wounds at week 4, 5, 6, whatever. They can do the follow-up at that time. It's an ideal time to wind the medication back, not prescribe it up, as the case may be. They're the ones who have to take that question on, do they repeat the opiate or not? And, the confidence to manage it down is really important. So in that zone, managing it is absolutely critical. So going too far ahead didn't work out. But now, knowing how we work things through properly, I think that'd be the right way to go to try and upset things a small bit. So it's positive thinking. And then if you can control matters, most of these situations will settle down in about 6 weeks. And then if it drifts out, remember, chronic pain comes in only after 12 weeks. Now that's short enough. If you're in pain, that's an awful long time. But realistically, that's what you're talking about. And then if you can do things properly in the first 6 or 8 week window, things will look good. And then you really narrow down the cohort that need that bit of support later on. And then they're the individuals who either go to pain management or other areas that go along the way itself. So again, it's observational. It just shows you what can be done when people are happy and comfortable working in the area. It's tremendous to see this great work going on.
And that's all we have time for in this episode. Thank you so much, Professor Hegarty, for joining me to chat about innovation in pain medicine and all the amazing developments that are happening there. Please tune in for further episodes of the Innovation in Healthcare podcast series.
That brings us to the end of this episode. Thank you for tuning in. Please subscribe to The Medical Independent for the latest healthcare news and debate. Sign up at www.mindo.ie to stay up to date on all the latest medical news. Join the discussion on Twitter at med_Indo News. Introducing the new Medical Independent app. Why not join over 14,000 healthcare professionals and stay up to date on the latest healthcare news in Ireland? Read in-depth reports on the issues impacting the health service and medical professionals. Trusted insights, breaking news alerts, in-depth analysis and more. Download the Medical Independent app on the Apple Store or the Google Play Store by searching the word Mindo. The Medical Independent app. Your news, your way.